What's up? And we've got another video. Okay, this is gonna be a pretty fun one. It's from a new person on the channel and we haven't reacted to yet. Trust me, bro. How humans survived in every time period. Like crustacean? Let's check it out. Go ahead and like the video.
How humans survived in every time period. This is
Okay.
you, the average, everyday, modern human being. Historically speaking, you are soft, squishy, and weird.
Hey,
and although you may not
not
look
that
like
soft.
it, you are an apex predator, residing at the very top of the
Apex.
global food chain. But this has not always been the case. And this evolution of human dominance has taken hundreds of
Monster Hunter.
thousands of years to manifest. And where it's gotten us is you laying on the couch ordering Uber Eats without a care in the world. But the struggles that humanity has faced to get us to this very position is anything but pretty. And it's for this very reason that we are going to be investigating exactly how humans endured and survived every era of history, as well as seeing what it would take for a modern human to survive in previous time
Forgot the other
periods.
things
Let's
here.
begin. The Stone Age. The first thing you're going to notice after being dropped in the Stone Age is the sheer shock of how little you truly have. In the Stone Age, you have no phone, wallet, glasses, watch, clothes. You are truly left to your own devices. And it's up to you to figure out how
There were
to
no
survive.
devices
Luckily, not
to be
too
left
far in the
to.
distance, you notice a small tribe of humans. And you know better than to interact with them, so you start by observing them. One of the first things you notice is how little these people have. This small tribe of humans
got
have
nothing.
animal pelts draped over their body, and beyond that, appear to only have a pile of rocks
Sticks and
and sticks
stones.
at their disposal. The settlement that they're in is rudimentary and looks almost temporary. And that's because humans at this point in the early Stone Age are still primarily nomadic, meaning that long-term settlements aren't established yet. And although these people are occupying this area now, they likely won't be there in a few months, as they will likely seasonally follow animals in different weather
is goated
patterns.
right here.
Taking a closer look at this pile of sticks, you notice that they're not just sticks. They're actually tools. And these
6
rocks
grams
that
of
they're
sugar,
carrying
bro.
all serve a purpose. Some of these longer sticks have pointed, jagged rocks at the ends, while some of these shorter sticks have large black rocks attached to them. And you notice that these are spears and obsidian axes. You notice one of these people actually creating these tools. They are literally using stones to carve out other stones. At this point, you're already taking a mental note of how simple
It's
the
real
Stone Age
weird.
appears to be in comparison to the modern day. And while that is definitely true,
YouTube.
it's important
It's real
to
weird.
also note that just because something is simple, it does not mean that it's easy. We've talked about some scary stuff in this video so far, but you know what else can actually be pretty scary? Trying to
What's that?
find a doctor. 1 minute you're
it's
searching the
mad.
web, and the next you're lost in a black
Hey.
hole of phone calls, outdated websites,
this
and
nonsense?
endless wait lists. You
It
think
is.
you found the right video. Besides just sitting around and crafting stone tools that literally define this entire time period, there are a lot of other skills required to survive. One of the more unlikely culprits is actually social skills, which may seem a bit random, but when you think about it, your tribe in the Stone Age is literally your lifeline. Every aspect of life is so time consuming and takes so much
Yeah, if
effort.
you-
Collecting food, cooking food,
Yeah, if you're out there on
fabricating
your own
tools,
trying to
preparing
solo dolo
builds,
in the Stone
migrating.
Age, you're getting
Literally
clapped.
everything takes so long. And it truly
You're getting
does
clapped.
take a village in the Stone Age just to support each other, because everybody plays their role. We are talking
Yeah.
about real hunter-gatherer times. And it's
Nowadays,
for this reason that you need to
a little bit
provide
different,
value
but-
to the group that you live in. Because if you are in a group and you are unable to perform in any aspect of your tribe, there's a very likely chance that you're going to be exiled.
You're
if your
outta
gathering
there.
sessions are consistently unfruitful, and if you are simply not pulling your weight in the group, then the entire group is going to have to make the decision between picking up your slack or cutting off the weakest link and exiling you from the tribe. And during a time where every day is a struggle to survive, you do not even have the luxury of picking up anybody else's slack. And for the edgy lone wolves watching this video, being alone in the Stone Age may not seem like such a bad thing until you realize that not only does every aspect of life require a group to truly thrive, but in this time period, you're also susceptible not only to nature, but natural predators. Because that's right, in the
Yep.
Stone Age,
The
humans
saber-tooths.
definitely have natural predators. And if one of these predators see a lone human walking around, they're either going to assume
You're
you're
cooked.
old, sick, exiled, lost, and it doesn't really matter which one is the case, because in any of
getting
those
picked off.
instances, you are vulnerable, meaning that a predator can easily make you lunch.
Yeah.
With this new
Like,
realization,
1v1,
you decide to
running
introduce
the
yourself
ones
to this
back
group
then was
and make
crazy.
yourself at home, because the only way you as a modern person has any chance is by making some good friends. Fortunately, this tribe takes you in, but you are tasked
Swinging,
with your
bro.
first job,
Swinging
making
in the
fire.
Stone Age. Why was he
Another
twirling
essential
his
skill
fingers
of
like
Stone Age
that?
survival. As you gather a few sticks,
What
you
kind of
realize that the
video is
entire
this?
tribe is looking at you. And they didn't give you this task as a job, they gave it to you as a test.
Test?
Because if you can't start a fire, then there is absolutely no way you can pull any weight, and they're better off leaving you behind. Although fortunately for you, you watched Survivor Man a time or two and spun a stick on a log like your life depended on it, getting a kindling going, and then a small fire, proving your worth to the group and ensuring your survival, at least for that day. As the day goes on, you are informed that it's now time to hunt. The tribe has sharpened tools, a new fire, and it's time to eat. And you're being invited to hunt with the tribe. With no other option, you accept the offer and you begin on the journey.
Is he still
One of the first
swinging?
things
Does
you
he have
realize is
clothes
that while
yet?
these people may be
Do
human,
we have
they're
clothes? Why are
definitely
we still
not the same
swinging
as
in
you,
the Stone
because their
Age, man?
endurance is next level. These hunters that you are struggling to keep up with can seemingly run for
Just
days.
swinging,
and not only
bro, come
that,
on.
they know exactly where they're going, and they can
I'm
read
just
the
worried about the
landscape like the
video.
back
Hopefully it's
of their
okay.
hands. This deep connection to the landscape you inhabit is
Minecraft.
crucial for long-lasting
Minecraft?
survival in the wild. And as a modern human, it's a skill set you're going to have to develop. But for a Stone Age human, this is the only life you know, because you are still deeply connected and ingrained in nature. After a successful hunt, you return back to the camp exhausted, while the others you went out with seem barely phased at all. And that's because for you, this
Why
was
does he
the
look like
workout
a
of a
monkey?
lifetime. But for these
He's a
prehistoric people, this
Neanderthal.
was simply everyday life. And this experience gave you a lot of context into how humans survived in the Stone Age. Survival wasn't a hobby or a job or entertainment.
was to- you're
Survival
doing
was a
it.
daily task, day in
I
and day
forgot
out. And there was
survival
no
was a
work-life
hobby
balance,
nowadays.
because your life
Well,
was
natural
work.
survival,
And
not
anything
survival in
you
general.
needed,
Survival
you
in
had to
society
work
is not a
for.
hobby.
The clothes on your back, the food in your stomach, the wood
That's
in the
real.
fire, the stone on your spear,
like, in
the
nature.
cave that you're sleeping in. Everything required effort. And with that, we understand that Stone Age humans survived because of their deep understanding of the landscape that they inhabited. And these skills allowed them to
Shout
consistently
out to
find
y'all
places to live
for
temporarily
letting us
or
get
even
where we
long
are,
term.
where I
And on
can
top of their geographical
enjoy a root
knowledge,
beer
your
and
ability
watch a
to
video
fashion
about
tools
y'all.
out of materials simply laying on the ground is extremely
appreciate you.
impressive, and allowed them to not only catch animals and protect themselves, but also to create clothing and process food and make other tools. And with that, if you could understand the landscape and develop your own tools, then the only other thing you really needed was the ability to create fire. And with that,
Okay.
you had every aspect of life essentially covered. Besides, obviously, shelter and water, but those are also part of understanding the landscape, because the water that you get comes from natural sources. And during the early Stone Age, most of the places you
The
inhabit
ice?
are also typically
No, this
natural
isn't the
structures,
Ice Age, it's
or
the Stone
extremely
Age.
simple
It's the
structures
same
made
time
using natural
frame,
materials.
kinda.
Because of this experience you've had with these Stone Age people, you've gained a newfound respect for prehistoric humans. And although you now have a
Still
better
slinging,
understanding
bro.
of how cave people lived, you also are very certain that you want to spend no more time during the Stone Age, because you've been spoiled by the modern day, and the Stone Age is interesting, but it also makes camping look like a 5-star resort. And with that, we decide it's time to move on to the next time period. The Bronze
Okay.
Age. One of the first
Ooh, the
things you need to be
Bronze
aware
Age.
of
Let's
before we drop
go.
you into the Bronze Age is this. The Stone Age literally took
The
place over the
Bronze
course of millions of
Age.
years. But the Bronze
Yeah.
Age is where we truly see the beginning of human technological development
Civilization.
hit an exponential point. Because what humans are about to develop over the
This
next
is like
couple thousand
civilization
years
type
is
stuff.
going to
Before
make
it
the
was like
development over the
barbarians.
millions of years in the Stone Age seem like child's play. Although it was
Yeah.
obviously a necessary part of our human development. After being dropped in the Bronze Age, you almost don't recognize the world that you were looking at. Obviously, there are some glaring similarities between the Stone Age and the Bronze Age, but the differences are stark. One of the first things you notice is that the people aren't
Actual
wearing pelts
houses.
anymore. They're wearing clothes.
And
now you
clothes.
feel underdressed because you're the only one wearing a loincloth. But beyond
I
just
wanna
the
see the
clothing that
first
people are
person to
wearing,
pull up
society looks completely different
to
than
like
it
a
did in the
Bronze
Stone
Age
In the Bronze
society
Age,
that
we
was
see
like a
people begin to
Neanderthal.
create settlements, and with that, we see agriculture, we see animal farming, we see settlements, and for the
Yeah, I
first
wanna
time,
see
we see
that.
two very important innovations. We see metal forging, and we see the wheel. The collection and forging of metals is
Ooh.
what obviously separates the Stone Age and the Bronze Age. And while upgrading from obsidian tools to copper swords is definitely an
this is like when
improvement
people
and ensures
gain
that tools are
sentience,
able
it
to
feels
last
like.
a lot longer, it isn't the only
Which is a
notable
crazy
change
statement.
by far. Having tools made in a new material is cool, but having a new material that allows the door to open for expertise to flourish and for unique tools to exist definitely opened up the floodgates for more innovation. With metal forging existing, we now have a method for creative people to develop and hone in their skills. And instead of relying on
Hey.
using a dull rock to sharpen a sharp rock, we now have the opportunity to create nearly anything we can imagine, at least for the time.
Hey.
And with that, the simple introduction of this new metal alone, society begins to evolve. evolved, because now we have artisans and experts, and then we have early jobs and an early economy based off of these new items and metals. And things are already developing at a pace quicker than I can describe. But besides just having new metals and new jobs because of it, we also have the wheel. And the wheel was crucial for literally mobilizing society. Not only did we see civilization establish settlements in the Bronze Age, but we also saw settlements become connected because of the wheel. And these settlements became connected through trade routes and war. Two things that also went on to further evolve society. However, even with all of these revolutionary technological developments, the Bronze Age to a modern human still seems like an extremely slow and barbaric way of life. And for that reason, you need to learn exactly how to acclimate to this time.
Man.
Fortunately, the development you found yourself here has almost everything a human could need. And one of the first things you do is get yourself some new drink, because that loincloth had the ladies and the men looking at you the wrong way. Walking through this village, you understand that community is still extremely important. However, this stage of the game, by game I mean history, is a lot less grindy. Instead of spending all day looking for berries, you are simply picking the berries in the garden. Instead of spending the entire day looking for a goat, you are simply taking one from the farm. And instead of feeling like you have to do everything all the time, for the first time you feel like you actually have the opportunity to specialize and focus on something. And although things are definitely looking a lot better than they did in the Stone Age, in the Bronze Age, you still need to make sure that you're carrying your own weight, because at the end of the day, you need to put a roof over your head and food in your stomach today. And what that means is you once again need to provide value. And while the value you provide in the Bronze Age looks different than the Stone Age, the general concept still applies. There are no free lunches, and if you want to survive, you need to do something. Although in the Bronze Age, there are more opportunities. Since your goal is survival, you decide that joining any sort of army is not for you, and you're also not interested in any form of combat sport involving a copper sword. You briefly ponder potentially becoming a criminal,
the copper sword play might be kind of clean.
Free. Although, after seeing how basically every crime can be punishable by death during this period of time, you realize that a modest job may be your best way of surviving. Even though there's a lot more technology in the Bronze Age, the components required
you
for life
gotta really
are still
want
the same.
it
You need food,
if you're gonna
water,
go for
and
that.
shelter. And the one job that you identify that can provide you all of this is farming. Because of the new tools and methods introduced in the Bronze Age, mass farming is at an all-time high, at least relatively. And for that reason, there's a lot of opportunity to work within farming. And a lot of these jobs provide food, shelter, and water in return for your all-day, indefinite, back-breaking labor. It's not glamorous, but your goal here is survival. You're not trying to be rich or famous. You simply just want to live a long, safe life. But after making yourself useful on the farm,
long is
breaking
crazy
your
in
back,
this times,
even though you
because
now
like
have
long
new
could be
tools,
like 30
a wheel,
years.
and new clothes, you decide it's time to continue moving. Because although the Bronze Age
From
and Stone
Spawn.
Age feel like night and day in human history, you know that there's a lot more to come, and you want to experience it. The Iron Age. The difference between Bronze Age and Iron Age is not nearly as shocking as the difference between Stone Age and Bronze Age. However, it doesn't mean that the advancements are any less important. During the Iron Age, we don't necessarily see an entirely new way of life, although we see an expansion upon the previously established way of life in the Bronze Age.
It's just way better.
Obviously, the most notable difference being the new metal at play. Iron changed the metal tool game like never before, and that's because it was readily available and extremely durable. And because of that, iron tools became economical. And what that means is, not only was there some tools, there was a lot of tools. And with more tools being in the hands of more people, human development began to ramp up even quicker than before. And because of this, we started to see society truly hit scale. Farming, both agriculture and livestock, became more optimized. Iron mining became more optimized. Metal forging became more optimized, and there was more of it. And because of this, everything that the Bronze Age really established, the Iron Age was able to run with. And that's kind of a common theme in every time period so far. Every lesson, development, technique developed in the previous time period can be applied and expanded upon in the next one. And that's kind of life in general, if you think about it. Regardless, with yourself being dropped in the Iron Age,
what's
my
going
advice
to
to you
happen
on
when
surviving
AI
wouldn't
gets
be much
like
different
that.
from the Bronze Age. Make sure you are refining your social skills to have a good circle of people around you, and make sure that you are obeying the law. Make sure you're not getting yourself into any wars, and make sure that you're making yourself valuable without making yourself a target. Since you already have experience from farming in the Bronze Age, I would recommend farming once again in the Iron Age. You can make a living, afford shelter, afford food, be around water,
we
and
gotta
if
switch it
everything
up.
took a nasty turn, you would
guess
just
we
have the
still
skill
gotta
set to
survive,
provide
right?
for yourself if all else
We do
fails.
something else
And
that
might
might
I
get
add, in this
risky.
time period, to take up some sort of sword fighting hobby in the background. Not because you want to fight in a war, but because you want to be able to protect yourself in any situation.
Yeah.
Like they say, it's better to be a warrior in a garden
And your
than a
family.
gardener in a war. The medieval era.
Yeah,
One of the
low-key.
first things you notice after landing yourself specifically in medieval England is the difference in people. There's civilizations like you saw in the Iron Age, although this civilization is different. It's obviously more developed, but one of the biggest things you notice is the sheer amount of class separation. Most of the people you see roaming the streets don't look super different than they did in the Iron Age. Although you do see almost a new class of people. You see merchants with elaborate clothing, you see nobility with clean robes, and you even get a glimpse of the king going
snap.
down the street. And it's with this initial
Nah.
impression that you realize that you're not in Kansas anymore. Besides
Get
the
'em outta
differences
here.
that you see, there's a big difference that you can smell. Because being smack dab in the middle of medieval England, you can smell everybody
Nasty,
and
bruh.
everything. And that's because with how developed
Nasty.
cities have become, people are being
They
more
got
and more
so many
crammed into
people.
smaller and smaller
Yeah.
places. And for that reason,
First
everybody
cities are
is literally
trash.
in everybody else's business.
Literally.
And if you thought working on a farm in the Iron Age smelled bad, well, just smell medieval England. And make sure you keep your
Ugh.
mouth closed if you see
No
anybody on the
thanks.
second floor dropping fudge popsicles out of a bucket from their window.
Ugh,
After noticing this
bruh,
rather
nah,
large wealth
man.
gap, you
Y'all
understand that
got
if
it.
you want to survive, your best chance is by at least having a bit of money. Because the vast majority of
Mm-hmm.
poor serfs, unless they are skilled laborers that are able to stay in town, are typically sent to the countryside for agricultural jobs. And while that
Mm.
was something you have experience in, you don't want to slave your life away anymore. And the life of a serf in medieval times is typically not one that screams longevity. Long hours,
Yeah.
poor food, poor health care, no education, unsafe work conditions. There's a lot that could go wrong. And for that reason, with your goal of surviving, you want to have at least a few shillings in your pocket.
Yeah,
you
get
end up
some
closing up to a
pockets.
local sword
Get your
merchant. And
pockets
while
up.
this is a suitable side gig and you're able to learn the business and grow within the company, you realize that
Blacksmithing?
society is a lot more complex than previous times. Obviously, royalty is relatively new in your historical travels, but on top of this, religion is a massive staple, not only in day-to-day life, but also in your survival. In medieval England, the Roman Catholic Church ruled over everything. And for that reason, if you were not following the rules of the church, you could be fined. And if you publicly disobeyed or potentially disagreed with the church, you could be killed.
Here we go
which
with
is
the
why
power
you quickly
hungry
begin
disc.
to study the Bible and learn a
Here
few
we
prayers
go.
in Latin. After getting your side gig and getting familiar with the local customs, you are now met once again with the harsh reality of sickness. While human development
Oh,
has brought us
yeah.
new major cities,
Yikes.
we are now
Don't
experiencing
start
the
coughing.
downfall of some of these overcramped and
Your whole
unsanitary
lineage
cities,
might get clapped.
specifically plagues. And if you just
Back
happen to be
then.
living through 1348, your best chance of survival would be leaving the city immediately and taking the skills you learned in the Stone and Bronze and Iron Age to live off the
Yeah,
land
and just
yourself.
start
Because
chilling.
during the plague, even buying bread from somebody could be a death sentence. But
Yeah.
outside of these relatively niche plague times, there's
Your
still
whole
the
lineage
overarching
could get
lack
wiped
of
out with the
healthcare.
wrong loaf
Obviously,
of
there was
bread.
basically
Somebody
none in
cough
any
in the
of
wrong
previous time
direction,
periods.
your
In the medieval
whole
era specifically,
bloodline
there
is
was at
gone.
least development with healthcare, but a lot of these treatments were actually more harm than good. Meaning that if literally anything
Ooh,
went
the
wrong, whether it be a
apothecaries.
broken bone or a small cut, if you weren't
I always thought they were
perfectly good
pretty
shape
cool
and
with
perfectly
the
healthy,
masks.
you were much closer to death than you would have ever been in the modern day. But
Not
even
cool,
if you
just
were lucky
unique,
enough to be
really.
surviving in the medieval era during a
wouldn't.
time when there was no plague,
I
you
wouldn't
had a
like
job
it.
that was making you not
But
a
it's
poor
unique.
serf, you still had to hope to God, literally, that there was not
And
a
random.
war on the horizon. Because if you, as a young adult, were summoned to war, you
why'd
essentially
you
had no
shape
option.
it?
Either go to
Yeah.
war or be killed for not going to war. And if
I
you
think
went
it's
to
'cause
war
they
and
could
got
put things
injured,
in
your
it,
chances
right?
of dying were high. And if you went to war and got injured and survived, once you came home, you would not be able to continue your work.
I
and
actually
you
kind
would
of want to
essentially
look that
be poor
up.
on
Why
the
were
street and likely
apothecary masks like that? Let's look into that actually real quick.
die on
Because I think there was a
And with
reason. I
that
think they like kept
hard
certain
lesson learned,
like
you realize that if you
things
want
in their mask, didn't they? Why were apothecary masks worn? To protect the wearer from miasma. Yeah, I figured that. I know that part. The bad air. But like, why are they beak shaped? Yeah, they were filled with the herbs and spices. I knew it. I was paying attention in world history. I was paying attention. That was one of my favorite classes. Loved it.
you want to survive in medieval times, you need to not only work a job, but be savvy enough to
Yeah.
earn a higher than normal income. You have to religiously follow the church. You must never break a law. You must never upset a royal. You must
Never
never
break a law
be
and
in
get
bad
caught
health or
or
become
punished
injured.
for
You
it.
must hope that a war never breaks out that requires your assistance. And spoiler alert, there was a lot of wars during the Middle Ages. And while you actually find the Middle Ages rather interesting, you know that this was not the place for you. And you decide to continue your journey, the early modern era. The early modern era is the shortest time period we're going to discuss on this list, besides the modern era, which is still ongoing. The early modern era was only 300 years long, spanning from 1500 to 1800 AD. But this time period was
Great
pivotal
Pirate
for
Era.
human civilization. And while it consists of a lot of the things we've already discussed previously, the early modern era specifically is defined not by medals, but by intellectual pursuits, specifically in major developments in both world exploration and scientific pursuits. With the prosperity that
Great
Europe saw
Pirate Era.
during the Middle Ages, they decided that their
Gold
best and next
Roger,
course of action
King of
during
the
the early
Pirates.
modern era was to begin expanding, which is why we saw a plethora of colonization during this time, because these European countries wanted more land, more wealth, more power. And because of this, the early part of the early modern era is rather tumultuous. There is a lot of religious instability, and also instability across the globe with this newfound colonization. And because literally so many revolutions took place during the early
Slaves.
modern era, if you have to be a part of one of the revolutions, I would recommend being a part of the scientific revolution, specifically by
low-key.
trying to get your name in the same group as Copernicus, Galileo, or Newton.
Low-key.
And while you might be thinking, I'm not nearly as smart as any of those guys, you don't need to be. Because if you're a modern person just being dropped in the early modern era, then you have
yeah,
a
you'd be
plethora
put
of
on.
knowledge that you could use to change the world early and make yourself
Yeah,
not
you'd be
only a
put
remembered
on.
scientist, but
You'd be
also
putting on
literally a
everyone.
god. But also, keep in mind that revealing too much knowledge would actually not get you
It could get you
respected,
killed,
it would get
though.
you killed. Because you would just
Yeah.
seem crazy. And if you challenge
Yeah,
the
'cause
status
back
quo
then,
too much, well, that
like-
wouldn't be good for you. So,
Yeah,
with the
back
goal of
then, it
survival,
was
you drop
like-
hints about knowing things and become
It
a respected
wasn't,
philosopher, making sure that you stay vague, but also
Yeah, it wasn't
inspirational. Near
actually
the end of the
loved
early modern era, you begin to see things that
until
you
the person
recognize from the
died.
modern era. You see democracy, capitalism, banking,
lot of people's,
personal
like, actual
individuality, and
ideas
this is
and
all a
breakthrough
part of
stuff
the
didn't really
Enlightenment near
come
the
into
end of the
fruition
early
until
modern
they
era.
died.
And it's with this realization
Which
that you
sucked.
remember that you're almost home. You've been going through almost all of human history, and now your final step is go
Yay.
back to the modern day. And while your time in every different
Yay.
time period has been brutal and tough, and you've missed even the most modern of luxuries like Uber Eats and a toilet, you've definitely grown to respect previous eras of history, and you've had a
Yeah.
major boost in respect for people
100%.
who came before you, and essentially paved the way
100%.
for you to live the comfortable life you live today. And with that, you realize that there's only one more place to go,
Love
and that's
y'all.
returning home, the modern era. Obviously, if you want to know how to
Okay,
live in the
so how
modern
do we
era,
survive
go
in
look
the
in the
modern
mirror or
era?
ask your grandpa. But I want to point out some interesting nuances that separated the early modern era from the modern era.
I don't
Because
know
the
about
modern
that.
era isn't just this week or this month. It dates back all the way to the early 1800s. And even
Yep.
though it was less than 200 years ago, the early 1800s is a much different time and lifestyle than
Yeah.
the 2020s. One of the biggest technological advancements during the modern era is the Industrial
Machinery.
Revolution, which
Yep.
swept through Europe, America, and eventually the world, and changed not only jobs and economies, but lives forever. But the Industrial Revolution wasn't just the building of factories and a boost in manufacturing jobs. It also meant further development in urban areas, but specifically with developments in mining and transportation, with trains, buggies, and eventually cars becoming popular. And these tools, once again, changed the world and allowed further and further exponential development. And while this Industrial Revolution definitely improved the quality of life of some, there is undoubtedly still
Yeah.
horrible labor conditions
of
existing
people
for
had to
those
pay
working in
for it.
factories. And this includes women and children being paid next to nothing for backbreaking and then sometimes deadly jobs. But it's once again these hardships that people go through that brings us to the modern day. 2025. Now, this is not to say that the modern day is perfect, because it's not by any means. And this also isn't to say that
Yeah,
every
definitely
hardship in the
not.
past has been justified because it led us to today. Although, what I am trying to say is that the world we live in today is a work in progress and has been developed by hundreds of thousands of years of human development, driven by the urge to do better
Shout
and
out to
never give
y'all.
up. Humans have always endured, persevered, and grew. And if you look at the timeline of humanity, that is a fact. So, although in the modern day we may have our own issues and be squishier than we used to be, we are still actively participating in this
Squishier.
ongoing pursuit
Are we?
of human development. And humans, at the end of the
Maybe
day,
a
are
little bit.
badasses. While there's definitely issues in the modern day, life has
Maybe a
never been
little bit.
more comfortable and convenient and easier to at least stay alive.
Maybe
And
getting
with that,
cut
ladies and gentlemen,
easier or
that is
something
how
like that,
humans
bruised
survived
easily.
in every time period. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. And if you did, check out the video on screen right now.
Less
It's actually a
sunlight.
playlist of all of my in every time period videos. In that
Aw.
playlist, I have videos about what it was like to be
Oh,
rich in
there's
every time
more.
period, what it was like to be broke in every time period, and also how
You
to
know
be
what?
rich in every
You
time
might
period,
watch
and
some more of
also
these,
how
actually.
humans
I
got high in
enjoyed
every
this.
time period. There's a
You
lot
might
of great
watch some more
videos.
of
If you enjoyed
these.
this one, you're gonna love that playlist. Thank you guys
Yeah,
so
I'm
much
gonna
for
check
watching
out.
this video. And as always, trust me, bro.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, W video, man. I like that. That was a cool little history lesson. I love the history type videos and stuff like that. That was really cool. But yeah, let me know what you guys thought about that. Do you guys think, all right, which one do y'all think y'all would make it up to? What's like the furthest back one that you think you could survive in? Let me know down in the comments. And like the video, subscribe. And I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.